Hello everyone. On behalf of DPS, I would like to welcome you all to this month's webcast, Manipulating Data in Excel. My name is Chris Siebold, and I am joined today by Mike Estes. If you have questions at any time during the webcast, please use the chat function in GoToMeeting. At the conclusion of this presentation, please join us for a short question and answer session. Now at this time, I will turn the presentation over to Mike Estes.
Hi, this is Mike Estes. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be covering reviewing DPS data download, analyzing the data, benefits of pivot tables. We'll share some pivot table examples and dive a little deeper into how to filter that data and look at pivot charts. And then, as Chris mentioned, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Here I've opened up the DPS data download logon screen. This is something you do have to be authorized for, so not just any user can get on this. For more information on this and other download options to Excel, you can check out Ryan Ingram's video from November. You should have received a link to that prior to this webcast. If not, stick around for the Q&A afterwards or contact your SSA and we'll make sure that does get to you. I'm going to go ahead and log on here. And I'm going to choose the Data Exporter option. For my data type, I'm going to choose Sales Analysis, and then I'm going to choose a selection criteria Warehouse. Choose the Indie Warehouse to narrow it down a little bit. And Sales Analysis opens up, and I'm going to open that up using Excel. Now, I'm going to zoom out just so you can see how much stuff is out here in this. In fact, I have to zoom out quite a ways, so small that you can't even see anything on this. In fact, there are 114 columns. Now I'm going to zoom out, back out, so that we can see what we're looking at here. Amongst the 114 columns, we have such things as sales rep, sold period. There's other columns such as the last landed, average and standard cost, date and time added, customer name and number. In fact, all the way over to the right in column D, E, and DF are the item number and the item description. All of those are great, valuable information. But how can we make use of that? With all of this data, can you find the data you're looking for quickly and easily? Does all of this data answer your questions? Or is there a way to tailor this that works for you? The answer to that last question is yes. There is a way to tailor it, and it's with pivot tables. Pivot tables are a great tool to take a large chunk of data, like this spreadsheet, and compress it down into useful information that's easy to read and follow. You can manipulate the data just about any way you want. You can look at comparing sales reps. Do you want to see sales from a certain time period? You can do that. Do you want to know how many items were on a certain order? You're able to do that with pivot tables. For the how-to on pivot tables and pivot charts, I'm going to hand it back over to Chris, and I'll join you for the Q&A.
Now that Mike has explained the benefits of using pivot tables, it's time to move forward and actually build one. But before we do, we have a couple housekeeping items to take care of. First of all, if you look up at the top of my screen, you'll see this Protected View ribbon. Now, if you don't have this ribbon, that's okay. That means you are ready to go ahead and edit your document. If you do have this bar up here, though, all you have to do is come over and click on the Enable Editing button. The screen may flash, that's okay, and then you'll see that it disappears, and now you are ready to edit. Furthermore, I'm going to first scroll back over here and make sure I'm up here at A1, or the very beginning of our document. You're going to see a couple rows here that we really don't need for our pivot tables. First of all is the Company 1 Warehouse Indie. That's just some of the items that pulled in when we did the data download. We really don't need those. We're going to be able to delete this row. At the same time, you can see the field names are right here as well. We're not going to need those either. Those actually may get in our way as we're building our pivot table. So what we're going to do is we want to delete these first two rows. To do that, go ahead and click up here. Click and hold a left click on 1 and bring it on down to 2. And then you'll see you have both of these rows are now highlighted. You can right click and delete. And now those rows are deleted, and now we're ready to move forward with our pivot table. So what we're going to do is go up here to the top of our screen, and we're going to click on the Insert tab. And this will bring up the Insert ribbon. As you can see then, we'll come down here and on the left hand side there's a little button called Pivot Table. All you have to do is click on there and it'll bring up the Create Pivot Table box. Now as you can see, Excel goes ahead and finds all of your data that you have in your chart currently. You can see right here in the table range. Now I would suggest that it's always good just to double check to make sure that Excel did get all of your data. So to do that, just simply scroll down to the bottom, and we can see here row 118 is our last row. Now if you look closely, you'll see a green chaser line almost going around our document. Everything inside of that chaser line is going to be our selected item. So you can see here that it does in fact get the last row. So we'll also go all the way over to make sure we get the columns. And we'll take a look, scroll up a little. And DJ, vendor name, is our last column. So in fact, Excel did select all of our data. If we go down here to the next option, choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. You can either choose a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. Now I'm going to suggest that we leave the default new worksheet selected. If you choose existing worksheet, Excel will build your pivot table right on top of your document that you have now. It kind of gets in the way. If you're going to use that document again later, you're not going to want that pivot chart on top. So I would say go ahead and select new worksheet. And go ahead, come down here and click OK. You can see now that after selecting OK, it brings up a whole new document for us. Pivot Table 1 can now be built. As you see down here at the bottom, we have two sheet 1s. If you click on the right one, you can see we have the original document where we're going to use our data for the pivot table. We'll go ahead and click back here on the left one, and we're back ready to start building our pivot table. I would like to insert a note here before we continue on. I am currently using Office 2013's version of Excel. Office 2013, Office 2010, Excel versions are very similar, so building pivot tables using those 2 years of programs are going to be almost identical. If you're using an older version of Excel, say 2003 or 2007, you may run into some more complications. Because of the advancements in the Excel program, a lot has changed when it has come to building pivot tables, and so that may be an issue for you. So now we are ready to build our very first pivot table. As we look over here on the left-hand side of the screen, in this Pivot Table 1 box, this is where our pivot table is going to start being built at. On the right-hand side, we have Pivot Table Fields. Here in this scroll menu are all of our headers that we have from our previous page. This is all of our information that we brought in to build this pivot table. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start, and we're going to build 3 different pivot tables today. They're going to get a little more difficult each time we go, so we're going to start with a very basic one to start with. What we're going to do first is we're going to show the number of customers associated for each sales rep. So we're going to scroll down here on our menu until we find Sales Rep 1. This is going to give the sales rep the employee number for our sales rep. Now there's 2 different ways that we can build these pivot tables. One is by going and clicking on checkboxes next to each of our menus. Now, an issue that you would run into as you continue on is when you select more of these, Excel tries to put it in the places where it thinks it would be best for to go, not necessarily where you want it to go. So what I would suggest doing is using the drag and drop method. What you can do is mouse over Sales Rep or any of these menu options, and you can see a 4-way triangle comes up. What you can do is click and hold, left click and hold, and then you can drag Sales Rep down here to the Fields area. Down here is where we're going to start building our table. What I'm going to do is drop Sales Rep 1 into the Rows area. As you can see, that has now put all of our sales rep numbers here on the left-hand side in rows. Now the second thing I'm going to grab is our customers. So to grab our customers, we're going to scroll down here to the bottom, and we're going to look for customer name. Now, you might have to scroll through here for a while. Once you start using pivot tables for a while, you're going to start remembering where some of this stuff is. Now, I can pull customer name down and say I want to drop it in columns. Well, that really doesn't help us. As you can see, it puts all of our customers across the top, and all of our sales reps are on the left-hand side. Well, this really doesn't show us where our customers, or what sales reps have our customers. So what I'm going to do is grab customers again and pull it down over here to rows. Now, if you look closely, you can see a little green line appear under sales rep. If I move it customers above, you can see a little green line appear above. Wherever that green line is where the item that you're dragging in is going to appear in relation to sales rep. So if I would drop it above, you can see it now gives our customer name and then the sales rep number underneath for each customer. However, this kind of goes on for a while, and it's not the best way to view this. So I'm actually going to flip this and pull customer down below sales rep. Now it groups all the customers together by the sales rep that they're assigned to. For example, sales rep number 2 has ABC International. As we scroll down, we can see sales rep 93 has a whole bunch of customers associated with them. Now this is a very basic pivot table. It may be, if you're trying to figure out real quick a couple items, how they're associated, this would be a great way to do it, and it's a lot quicker to find it than if we were trying to find that information in this document. So this is the first one, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start building our second pivot table now. For our second pivot table, we are going to show the average cost associated with the items that we have. But first of all, we need to get rid of all the information from our first pivot table. So all we have to do is come over here, left click on our items, and say remove field. Do the same thing for customer, remove field, and now we're back ready to build pivot table number 2. So to compare or to show the average cost for our items, the first thing we want to grab is our item number. To find item number, we're going to scroll down here and we can see item number is right here near the bottom. Click and hold and drag that down 2 rows. Now second, we're going to scroll up until we find our average cost. We can see average cost is right here. And we're going to pull average cost down and drop it in values. Now as you can see, it is now brought in the average cost of each one of our items, and we have items by item number. That is now over here in what they call the values field. This can be the sum of different items. There's all different sorts of values that can be associated in the values column. Money, whatever it may be. So as we look over here, we can now see that we have a cost. But maybe it's not shown in the best way. Maybe you'd like a dollar sign to appear or something along those lines. So what we're going to do, like you would with any other column formatting in Excel, go up here and hover over B until we get our down arrow, left click, and so it selects everything, right click, format cells. I'm going to come down, select currency. We see 2 decimal places. We're using the dollar symbol, and we're going to go ahead and select OK. As you can see now, it's formatted a little bit better, and for price-wise, you can see that it just kind of formats a little bit better. Now, if you've noticed something here, you notice the box on our right-hand side has disappeared. That's because the pivot table has not been selected. You see right now, I have selected over here, D13 is where I'm currently at. All you have to do is click back over on your pivot table and you get your chart back here on the right hand side. Now because we're using the values field, Excel goes ahead and does a mathematical equation for us. As you can see, right now it is doing the sum of the average cost. So if we scroll down to the bottom, it's giving us a grand total of all of our average costs. Well, you may be thinking 2 things. 1, well, maybe you want a different mathematical formula to show up down here. Or 2, maybe you don't want a grand total at all. Well, I'm going to show you how to handle both. If you want a different mathematical formula, all you have to do is come over in the values field and click on this little drop down arrow. Go up and choose value field settings. and it's going to bring up a box for you. You can see here in the middle, this is all the different mathematical formulas that Excel could perform on this column of data. Well, for this, I actually want to do an average, so I'm going to average the average of our prices. So I'm going to say OK, and you can see I now have a new average cost of $154.89. Well, you may be thinking now, well, maybe I don't want a grand total. I just want to see what the average cost is for each of my items, but I don't want a grand total to show at the bottom. To handle this, you'll go up and select Analyze tab under the Pivot Tools area and click on Options. Once Pivot Table Options comes up, you go ahead and click on Totals and Filters. And right here you can see grand totals. We have show grand totals for rows and show grand totals for columns. Since this is a column, I'm going to unselect this one, select OK, and you can see our grand total disappears. So then now that we've deleted our grand totals, let's do a little more editing to our second pivot table. So to do this, we're going to reselect our pivot table so we can get our guide on the right-hand side here brought back up. And let's say we want to add the description for our item numbers. We may not have our item numbers memorized, so we need to add our description. So to do this, we're going to select description or comment, click and drag that, and bring that down and drop that under item number. As you can see now, we have item number followed by the description of each item. So it gives you a little more idea of what we're actually looking at. However, you might have noticed that it's now duplicating our totals. So now instead of having just one 84.45, it's doing it for both the item number and the item description. Well, to get rid of that, what we'll do is go up here and click on Design, and over here on the left, we're going to select Subtotals. Now, when this drops down, this is one of the areas of Excel that is kind of frustrating because you really don't know which one of these three items that you have selected. Well, in this case, we actually have Show All Item Subtotals at the top of the group. Well, we actually don't want to see that. So what we're going to do is say Do Not Show Subtotals. You can see those disappear, and now we just have the average cost for each item one time. Now, before we move on to build our final pivot table, there's one more cool item of pivot tables that I'd like to point out, and that's pivot charts. To build a pivot chart, select the Analyze tab, and then select Pivot Chart. Now, this is no different than if you were building a chart from a regular Excel document. You can see you have all different charts that you can choose from. For this, I'm going to select a pie chart and click on OK. Now I'm going to grab the corners here and stretch this out to make it a little easier for you all to see. And now you can see this is pulling all of our data from our pivot table, putting it into this pivot chart. As you saw before, you can make all sorts of different pivot charts. You can grab this, move this around wherever you want on your document. Now to get rid of this, all you have to do is right click and select Cut, and it disappears. Now we're ready to build our final pivot table. But before we do, what I would like you to do is to actually delete this pivot table, and we're going to start fresh. The reason being is we did a lot of different formatting, especially when it comes to adding in dollar signs and that sort of thing. We got rid of our grand total. And so anytime you're going to build a new pivot chart, if you build a pivot table and that you've done a lot of editing to, I would suggest to go ahead and delete that pivot table, or just go ahead and create a new one. So for this instance, we're going to delete this pivot table. So we'll come down, right click, delete. It'll ask, are you sure? And say delete. And now we're back to our main document. Now just like before, we're going to insert, pivot table, do a double check to make sure it grabbed all of our data that we're needing. It did, and we're going to go ahead and say OK. And we're back ready to build our final pivot table. For our final pivot table, we're going to incorporate a lot of the ideas that we've already learned and incorporate a few new ideas as we go along. So what we're going to first do is go over here and we're going to find our customer name. So we're going to scroll down here to the bottom and we will look for our customer name. and it's right here. We're going to click and drag that down into our rows area. Second, we're going to choose our date added field. So to find our date added, we're going to scroll up just a little here, find date added, and we're going to drag this down and put it in column. Now you can see we have our customer names down the left hand side, and we have date added across the top. And finally, we're going to grab order quantity. To get to order quantity, it's about midway here in our listing. So we just go ahead and scroll up, and here's order quantity. Now we're going to drag order quantity and put it in our values area. Now you can see we have customers on the left, dates on the top, and then order quantity. So this is how many items were on each order and the date that they were associated with. Now, as we look here, you can see it's kind of hard to follow because there's no lines or anything to kind of guide you along the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our Design tab. And here in our pivot table styles, there's all sorts of different table styles that you can choose from. If you mouse over, you can see that the table changes as you move along. So I'm going to scroll down here a little, and I'm going to choose this pivot style medium 9, this blue table. Now, that kind of changes the look and feel of it a little bit, but it still hasn't added in anything to make it easier to follow our totals here. So what we'll do is in the pivot table style options, you have banded rows and banded columns. So I'm going to select banded rows, and you can see we now have lines going across our page, and I'll select banded columns. And now it's a whole lot easier to be able to follow the data that we have in our document. So now that we've got it easier to read our document, we're going to add in one more neat item when it comes to pivot tables. So what we're going to do is actually add a filter item in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to filter by sales rep. So we're going to scroll back up here to the top again and find our sales rep. Sales rep 1, we're going to click and drag and bring that down and put it in our filters area. Now you can see here at the top, Sales Rep 1 has been added in. In column B, it says All with a drop-down menu. If we click this drop-down menu, you can see here's all of our sales reps. Well, what this does, for example, if I would choose Sales Rep 35 and click OK, now watch our table, you see it gets rid of all the other information, and this filters everything out except for items associated with Sales Rep 35. I can do this for Sales Rep 30, whatever it may be, it'll show you their sales for that area. But I'm going to go back. I like to see all of them, so I'm going to select all. OK. So the filter is a nice way to just be able to, if you're trying to pinpoint your data even more, use the filter option, and that will work out well for you. Now the final thing I'd like to point out is how we can do another type of filter. Up here on column labels for our date, we're going to get it so we're not seeing all the dates. Maybe you want a specific date range, or maybe you just want to see sales from last year, whatever it may be. So I'm going to click on the down arrow for column labels and come down here and select date filters. You can see a whole bunch of different options for dates pop up. As I said, let's go ahead and take a look at last year. Select last year, and now you can see all of our sales for 2013 are what appears. So it's another form of a filter, kind of like we had over here for our sales rep, but it's another form of filter that you can use for your document. So now you can see there's a variety of ways that you can manipulate your data in Excel to get the exact information you're looking for. As Mike pointed out earlier, the documents that we download can be quite large. It takes a lot of time to sort through there to find the exact information you're looking for. So using pivot tables is just a great way to streamline your data, save you a lot of time, develop some nice reports, and just be able to find your data a whole lot quicker. I would encourage you to get out there and just start playing around with some pivot tables. You can't break anything, so just go out there and start making some pivot tables, see what you can create. We would like to thank you for joining today's webcast. Looking forward, April 16th, we will have iSeries LAN printer setup. That'll be our next webcast, so be sure to join us for that. At this time, we will open the floor up to any questions you may have. If you do have any questions, please type them out in the chat pane on GoToMeeting. Again, thank you, and our question and answer session will begin in just a few moments.